3 a.m. That was the time my neighbor's life effectively ended. I was lying in bed, wide awake, listening to the sound of catastrophic failure happening right next door. First, it was the mechanical scream of a water pump running dry. Friction building up, heat rising. Then came the smell. Acrid, burning plastic drifting through my window. And finally, the darkness. See, my neighbor thought he was smart. He thought he could steal from me, day after day, year after year, and I wouldn't notice. He thought, because I was the new guy in the neighborhood, I was an easy mark. He was wrong. He stole about $5 worth of water from my pipes. In return, I cost him his tenants, his income, his reputation, and his entire home. And the best part, I didn't even have to touch him. All I did was turn off a tap. Let's rewind a bit. I recently moved to a capital city in Asia. If you've never lived in this part of the world, let me paint a picture for you. It's chaotic, it's loud, and a personal space is just a suggestion, not a rule. I bought a house from some family friends. It was a steal, literally. They needed cash fast, hadn't lived there in 3 years, and sold it to me for pennies on the dollar. But as the saying goes, you get what you pay for. The place was a wreck, a total fixer-upper. The renovation had been abandoned halfway through. The front door, secured with a flimsy $2 padlock. No gate, no fence. Just an open invitation for the city to walk right in. On day one, I pull up to my driveway, and there's a strange motorbike parked in my garage, just sitting there, like they owned the place. I didn't call the cops. I didn't write a note. I just picked the bike up and put it on the street. That afternoon, I had a contractor install a heavy iron gate. About an hour later, I see this angry old man banging on the metal bars, shouting something I couldn't hear through the glass. I just watched him from the window, sipping my coffee. He eventually gave up, grabbed his bike, and stormed off. That was my introduction to the neighbor, a 3-story house right next door. He lived on the ground floor, a miserable old miser who hated that his free overflow parking lot was now occupied. The top 2 floors? He rented those out to tenants to fund his retirement. I knew he didn't like me. I knew he was watching me. But I had no idea he was already bleeding me dry. It started about a week after I moved in. I'm a big guy, 6 foot something, and after a long day of moving furniture in the tropical heat, all you want is a cold, high-pressure shower. I turned the knob, and nothing. Just a sad, pathetic trickle. I checked the other taps. Same thing. The pressure was dead. But then I heard it. Through the bathroom vent, coming from next door. The rhythmic, mechanical thump, thump, thump of a heavy-duty water pump kicking into high gear. Here's the thing about infrastructure in this city. The municipal water pressure isn't strong enough to push water up 3 stories. If you have a tall house, like my neighbor, you need a suction pump to pull water from the mains and push it up to a roof tank. I stood there, dripping wet, listening to his pump screaming, while my water turned to a drip. Coincidence? Maybe. But I don't believe in coincidences when money is involved. I decided to run a test. I waited. I stood in my bathroom for 10 minutes, towel around my waist, just listening. Finally, his pump clicked off. Silence. Immediately, I turned on my sink. Whoosh, full pressure. The water hit the basin with force. I turned my tap off. A few minutes later, his pump kicked back on. I checked my tap again. Drip, drip, drip. It all started to click. The water bills for this empty house had been climbing for years. The previous owners chalked it up to leaks or old pipes. But you don't get a bill that high from a dripping faucet. You get it when someone is siphoning your supply to run a 3-story apartment complex. At some point in the last 3 years, this old guy realized nobody was home. He probably hopped the fence, dug up the line, and spliced his intake pipe directly into my main supply. He wasn't just stealing a cup of sugar. He was stealing the utility I was paying for, to run his business, to bathe his tenants, to wash his clothes. He was a parasite. I sat on this information for a few days. I could have gone over there and knocked on his door. But what would happen? He'd deny it. He'd say I was crazy. He'd hide the evidence. I could call the utility company. They'd send someone out in maybe 6 weeks. And even then, they might just give him a warning. I looked at the math. Water here is cheap. Even with him stealing, my bill was only maybe $5 or $10 extra a month. It wasn't about the money. It was about the entitlement. It was about this man looking at my property and thinking, that's mine. I realized I didn't need the law. I didn't need a confrontation. I just needed physics. See, water pumps are designed to move water. But the water isn't just the payload, it's the coolant. The water flowing through the pump keeps the motor from overheating. If you run a pump dry, friction builds up fast. The seals melt. The bearings seize. The motor struggles, drawing more and more electricity, trying to spin an impeller that's locked up. And I knew something else about his house. It was old. The wiring was probably from the 90s. No circuit breakers, just old school fuses and decaying insulation. I formulated a plan. It was simple. It was legal. And it was devastating. I wasn't going to break into his house. I wasn't going to cut his pipes. I was simply going to exercise my right to turn off my water. Monday night, 4 days ago. I waited. I sat on my porch, smoking a cigarette, listening to the neighborhood sounds die down. Around midnight, I heard it. Click. Whirr. His roof tank float valve dropped. The signal was sent. His pump kicked on to refill his tanks for the morning showers. I stood up, walked over to my main water valve, and turned it 90 degrees to the right. Clunk. My water supply was off, which meant his water supply was off. I went back inside and waited. Normally, the pump runs for about 15 minutes to fill the tank, then shuts off automatically when the water level rises. But tonight, there was no water to lift the float switch. The tank was empty. The sensor was screaming, "Fill me," so the pump kept running, and running, and running. 20 minutes passed. The sound of the pump changed. It went from a low hum to a high-pitched whine. It was struggling. It was sucking air. It was getting hot. 40 minutes passed. I could smell it now. That distinct chemical smell of melting insulation and burning copper. The motor was seizing up, but the electricity kept flowing. It was drawing massive amps now, way more than the old wiring in his wall was rated for. Then, at 3 a.m., the climax. Pop. A sound like a gunshot, muffled by the wall. Then, the whine of the pump died instantly. But it wasn't just the pump. The street lights outside flickered. And looking through the window, I saw the ambient lights in his tenants' windows go black. The silence didn't last long. By 3:15 a.m., the shouting started. "Hey, the AC is off. There's no water. Smells like fire." I slept like a baby. The next morning, I woke up to a scene of absolute chaos next door. It turns out, my theory was correct. But the damage was better than I imagined. The pump had seized, overheated, and caused a massive electrical surge. It didn't just blow a fuse. It melted the main wiring harness for the entire house. The landlord, my neighbor, was running around like a headless chicken. His tenants were furious. In my country, tenant protection laws are strict. Water and electricity are considered essential human rights. You cannot deprive a tenant of these, regardless of the reason. The tenants called the police. When the cops arrived, they looked at the melted wiring. They looked at the burned-out pump. They declared the house uninhabitable until full repairs were made. One tenant moved out that same afternoon, demanded his deposit back immediately. The other tenant filed a formal police report. The landlord was hit with an immediate fine of $500 for negligence and code violations. In the U.S., $500 might not sound like a life-changing amount. But here, that's 3 months of average wages. That's a fortune. He had to refund the deposits. He had to pay the fine. And he was looking at thousands of dollars in electrical and plumbing repairs before he could ever rent those rooms out again. His income stream didn't just dry up, it evaporated. Sunday is moving day. The old man is packing up. He can't afford to fix the house without the rental income, and he can't live there without power or water. He's moving in with his daughter. Yesterday, he came to my gate. He looked tired, defeated. He asked me, keeping his voice steady, "Hey, did you turn off your water the other night?" I looked him dead in the eye, gave him a friendly smile, and said, "Oh yeah, sorry about that. I found a leak in my tank pipe. Had to shut off the mains until the plumber could come fix it." Why? Did something happen? I watched him process that. He knew. He absolutely knew. But he couldn't say a word. To admit that my water shutoff ruined his house would be admitting that he was stealing my water in the first place. He just swallowed hard, muttered, "Oh, okay," and walked away. Next week, I have a plumber coming to redo my entire system. We're cutting every pipe that leaves my property line. I spent $0 on revenge. He lost his business, his savings, and his home. Don't steal from your neighbors, folks. You never know who has their hand on the valve.